The mountain was supposed to be peaceful. That's what he told himself while driving up the long, narrow road that twisted between tall pine trees. It had been months since he last visited his cabin. Work had been stressful, city noise had been constant, and he just needed silence. Fresh air, quiet nights, and the comfort of being alone in nature, that was his plan. Nothing strange, nothing dramatic. But the mountain had different plans for him. He parked his truck beside the small wooden cabin, took a deep breath, and stepped out. The air felt colder than usual, and even the forest seemed quieter. No birds, no wind, nothing. Just stillness. He shook it off and walked toward the cabin door, carrying his bags. Everything looked normal from the outside, same wooden steps, same old porch, same little lantern hanging beside the door. But the moment he pushed the door open, he froze. The inside was completely dark. Not dim. Not lights are off dark. Completely, unnaturally dark, like the cabin had been abandoned for years. He clicked the light switch by the door. Nothing. He tried another switch. Nothing again. The refrigerator wasn't humming. The heater wasn't running. Even the small digital clock on the wall was dead. Every single source of power was gone. He frowned. The cabin always had some leftover power. Even after months, the clock usually blinked. The fridge usually hummed. But now, everything was silent. Too silent. This is strange, he muttered to himself. He carried his bags inside, lit a small battery lantern, and walked toward the back corner where the fuse box was located. Maybe a breaker had tripped. Maybe a fuse had blown. Simple problems. Normal problems. Problems that had logical explanations. He opened the fuse box. All switches were in the correct position. No burn marks, no broken wires, nothing out of place. The box was perfectly fine. So why is there no power? He whispered. Then he noticed something else. A faint sound outside, like a soft crunching of leaves. Someone stepping lightly. Someone moving slowly. He turned off the lantern and listened carefully. Crunch. 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 Footsteps. Very slow. Very close. His heart tightened a little. It could be an animal, he told himself. A deer. A raccoon. Anything normal. But the footsteps didn't sound like an animal. They were too heavy for that. Too precise. Like someone trying not to be noticed. He waited a few seconds. Silence. He slowly walked to the window and pulled the curtain just 1 inch. The forest outside was dark, especially without the cabin lights. But the moonlight helped him see a bit, and that's when something caught his eye. An orange cable. A long orange extension cable, running from the side of his cabin into the trees. That cable had never been there before. His eyes narrowed. He stepped outside, leaving the lantern inside so he wouldn't attract attention. The cold air hit his face sharply. He crouched down near the side wall and touched the cable. It was warm, meaning electricity had been flowing through it recently. But his cabin had no power. So where was the electricity going? And who connected this cable? He followed the cable with his eyes. It stretched deep into the woods, disappearing between thick bushes and tall trees. The direction didn't make sense. That part of the forest had no official trails. Only one person lived deeper inside the woods, Karen, the strange woman who bought the old cabin 2 years ago. She wasn't friendly. She wasn't social. She never waved. She barely spoke. And she always acted like the mountain belonged only to her. Could she have something to do with this? He followed the cable for a few steps, but then he stopped. Something didn't feel right. The forest felt too quiet. The air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. And he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. He looked around, scanning the dark trees. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. But he still felt eyes on him. He swallowed, stepped back, and returned to the cabin door. For now, he needed to stay inside. He locked the door, pulled the curtains closed, and sat at the table, thinking. Why was there an extension cable running from his cabin? Who placed it there? And why steal power from a cabin that belonged to someone else? He tapped his fingers on the wooden table. This wasn't just a blackout. This wasn't a simple technical issue. This was deliberate. Someone had cut his power and taken it for themselves. Someone confident enough to come close to his cabin. Someone who didn't care if they were caught. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. If the power issue wasn't solved soon, his food would spoil, his heater wouldn't work, and nights on the mountain could get dangerously cold. He had to fix this. But first, he needed to know what he was dealing with. He stood up again and looked outside one more time. That's when he noticed something new. Near the edge of the forest, just far enough to be hidden by shadows, a figure stood still. A human figure. Pale face. Watching him. Watching the cabin. Watching every move he made. But as soon as he blinked, the figure was gone. Like it had melted into the trees. He stepped back from the window, breath sharp and fast. This wasn't just a blackout. This was the beginning of something he did not understand yet. Something strange. Something dangerous. And whoever was in the woods was not done with him. The morning came slowly, with a pale gray light sliding between the tall pine trees. He had barely slept. Every sound outside, every crack of wood or rustle of leaves made him sit up straight in his bed. He kept remembering the figure he thought he saw at the forest's edge. Maybe it was his imagination, or maybe not. When the sun finally climbed higher, he stepped outside. The cold air bit his skin, but at least daylight made things feel safer. He walked straight to the orange extension cable. It still lay there in the dirt like a snake, pulling silently into the woods. He knelt down and touched it again. Cold now. Someone hadn't used it since the night. But one thing was clear, the cable wasn't his. It didn't come from his storage shed. Someone had brought it here. He followed it slowly. The ground was covered with dry leaves, and every step made a soft crunch. The forest felt awake now, birds chirped, a squirrel jumped across a branch, and the wind whispered through the trees. But even with all these sounds, he felt something else. Something watching. Something waiting. The cable stretched in a perfectly straight line. Whoever placed it knew exactly where they were going. He walked deeper. And deeper. And deeper. The trees grew taller and closer together. Sunlight struggled to reach the forest floor. After 5 minutes of walking, he paused. He turned back, but his cabin was no longer visible. Only trees. Endless trees. He sighed and kept moving. Another 10 steps, something strange appeared. A set of footprints near the cable. Large ones. Not from boots, from heavy shoes, maybe. The footprints looked fresh. Not even covered by leaves yet. He crouched down. 2 people, he thought. One heavier, one lighter. Walking side by side. His stomach tightened. He had only expected one thief. But now there were 2. He followed the tracks and the cable together. Slowly, the forest began to change. The trees thinned out. A small clearing opened ahead. Sunlight hit the ground again. And right at the center of the clearing stood another cabin. He stopped walking. Karen's cabin. It looked older than he remembered, dark red paint peeling, windows covered with thick curtains, chimney filled with soot. The place looked tired, like it hadn't been cleaned in months. But the strangest thing? A generator and 2 large fans sat outside, running loudly. He frowned. Why would someone use a generator and still steal power from him? What was going on? He stepped closer, and that's when he saw it. The orange cable ran straight into Karen's cabin window, taped down with black electrical tape. Not hidden at all. As if she believed no one would dare check. He took a deep breath, walked up to the small wooden porch, and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. After a long pause, the door opened a few inches. Karen stood there. Her messy blonde hair was tied in a half bun, her face looked pale, and her eyes were strangely wide, almost too wide. She smiled in a way that didn't feel friendly at all. "Oh, it's you," she said in a voice that sounded cheerful but fake. "What a surprise." He pointed at the cable. "Karen, why is my power running into your cabin?" Her smile twitched. "Oh, that? Silly me. I thought the mountain power was shared." "It's not shared. And my cabin has no electricity now." Karen laughed aloud, strange laugh. "Relax. It's just a little borrowing." "A little?" he asked. "You drained all of my power." She leaned closer. Too close. "I needed it," she whispered. "Some nights here are different." "What do you mean?" But she didn't answer. Instead, she pushed the door open wider, just enough for him to see inside. The cabin was a mess. Clothes everywhere. Boxes stacked near the walls. A radio buzzing with static. But what caught his eye was something else, something sitting in the middle of the cabin floor. A large metal box. With thick cables coming out of it. Cables connected directly to the stolen power line. "What is that?" he asked. Karen quickly stepped in front of the view. "Nothing. Just personal equipment." He raised an eyebrow. "Personal equipment that needs the entire power supply from my cabin?" She swallowed hard and shook her head. "You shouldn't be here. You really shouldn't." Something about her eyes made him step back. They were nervous. Afraid. Almost shaking. Like she knew something he didn't. He looked toward the forest behind her cabin. "Karen," he said quietly, "are you alone out here?" She froze. Her lips parted slightly. Her breathing changed. And then she whispered. "You need to leave. Now. Before he comes back." He stiffened. "Before who comes back?" Karen reached toward the door handle with trembling fingers. "Just go. For your safety." But before she could close the door, a deep male voice echoed from inside the cabin. "Karen? Who's at the door?" Her eyes widened in panic. She slammed the door shut instantly. He stepped back from the porch, heart pounding. That voice, he recognized it. But he couldn't remember from where. It sounded official. Confident. Like someone who was used to being obeyed. He turned to look at the forest once more. The air suddenly felt different, thicker, heavier. Like something dangerous was spreading through the quiet morning. He glanced once more at the orange cable. At Karen's closed door. At the footprints in the dirt. This wasn't just stolen power. This wasn't just Karen being strange. Something else, something bigger, was happening in the woods. And he had walked straight into the middle of it. He walked back toward his own cabin, but every step felt heavier than the last. Karen's shaking hands, her frightened eyes, and that deep male voice in the background, nothing about the situation made sense. Karen was strange, yes. But scared? Terrified? That was new. Back inside his cabin, he locked the door and sat on a chair, staring at the wall. Something inside him kept repeating the same question. Who was that man inside Karen's cabin? He rubbed his forehead. Karen lived alone. Everyone on the mountain knew that. She avoided people. She didn't invite guests. She didn't even like hikers walking near her property. So why was a man hiding inside her cabin? And why did she try so hard to keep him unseen? He stood up again. He couldn't relax. He felt unsettled, like the mountain itself was holding a secret. Every time he looked outside his window, he felt the trees were hiding something. The wind whistled differently. Even the birds sounded nervous. He needed answers. And he needed his power back. After a few minutes, he stepped outside again. He followed the cable once more, but this time he didn't walk all the way to Karen's cabin. Instead, he circled around quietly, staying behind trees and bushes. He wanted to see things without being seen. He crouched behind a fallen log. From there, he could see the back of Karen's cabin. Something was definitely going on. A second extension cable, shorter and thicker, ran from Karen's cabin into a metal shed behind the house. The shed door was slightly open, making a slow creaking noise in the wind. He narrowed his eyes. What was she powering in there? Suddenly, a loud bang came from inside the shed, like someone kicking something metal. He jumped a little but stayed hidden. Karen rushed out of the cabin, her hair messy, her hands shaking more than before. "Stop doing that," she yelled toward the shed. No answer. She grabbed the shed door and pushed it shut hard, then locked it with a heavy chain. Her breathing was fast. Her face red. She rested both hands on the shed door like she was trying to keep something inside. "That's enough for today," she whispered to herself. He pressed his back against the log and held his breath. Whatever was happening inside that shed, Karen could barely control it. After a moment, she turned and walked back into her cabin. Her steps were uneven, nervous. She kept looking over her shoulder even though she thought she was alone. He waited until she went inside. Then, slowly, he moved away before she spotted him. Back at his cabin, he paced the floor. Everything was getting worse. A strange man, a locked shed, stolen power, Karen's fear, nothing added up. This wasn't normal neighbor trouble. This wasn't just about electricity. He looked out the window again. Karen was now outside, dragging the long orange extension cable deeper into the dirt, trying to hide it under branches and leaves. She kept glancing toward his cabin like she wanted to make sure he wasn't watching. But her movements were shaking, almost desperate. Then something even stranger happened. She suddenly froze. Her body went stiff. Her head turned slowly toward the forest behind her cabin. She wasn't looking at him. She wasn't looking at the cable. She was looking at the woods. Like something inside the trees scared her more than anything else. Her lips moved, saying something he couldn't hear. Then she hurried back inside her cabin and slammed the door so hard the sound echoed across the mountain. He swallowed. This wasn't normal behavior. As the sun started lowering, he made a decision: he had to talk to her again. He needed the truth, or at least a piece of it. He waited until the sky turned orange. Then he walked back toward her place. But this time, he didn't bother hiding. He marched straight up the porch and knocked firmly. The door didn't open right away. He could hear soft whispering inside, Karen's voice talking fast and quietly like she was arguing with someone. Then the door opened an inch. Karen peeked out. Her eyes were red like she had been crying. "You can't be here," she whispered harshly. "I need answers," he said. "What's happening? Why is my power going into your cabin? Who is the man inside? What's in the shed? And why are you so scared?" Karen looked left. Then right. Then over her shoulder. Finally, she opened the door a little more. Her voice was shaking. "I didn't want you to know. Not you, not anyone." "Know what?" Her eyes filled with fear. "I can't tell you. If I talk, he'll hear me." "Who?" She swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and whispered, "The man inside is not my cousin. He's not my friend. He's not supposed to be here at all. He just..." A loud crash came from inside the cabin. Karen flinched so hard she dropped her keys. She grabbed the door and pulled it closed. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, voice breaking. "Go home. Pretend you saw nothing. Don't ask questions." "Karen." "Please," she cried and slammed the door so hard the frame shook. He stood there, stunned. Her words repeated in his mind. "If I talk, he'll hear me. He's not supposed to be here. Pretend you saw nothing. He stepped back slowly, heart pounding. Something terrible was happening inside that cabin. Something Karen was too afraid to explain. And whatever or whoever was in there did not want him involved. But he already was. Night came fast, too fast. The mountain sky turned a deep blue, then almost black, as clouds rolled in silently. He sat inside his cabin with only a lantern on the table. The soft yellow light made long shadows dance across the walls. And the quiet felt heavier than ever before. He tried to distract himself. He made tea. He checked his phone, no signal, as usual. He read an old book for a few minutes. But his mind kept drifting back to Karen's trembling voice, her red eyes, and the loud crash from inside her cabin. If I talk, he'll hear me. The sentence repeated in his head like a warning he couldn't ignore. He finally stood up, walked to the window, and pushed the curtain aside slightly. Outside, the forest looked darker than any night he remembered. The trees looked like tall shadows. The wind had died completely. Not a single branch moved. No animals. No sounds. Just stillness. He checked the time on his watch, almost midnight. He sighed and stepped away from the window. But before he could reach his bed, a sound cut through the silence. Click. He froze. Click. Click. Slow, sharp, and close. Like someone tapping metal against wood. He turned back to the window and pulled the curtain very carefully to the side. His breath caught in his throat. A flashlight beam moved outside his cabin. Someone was out there. Someone walking slowly. Too slowly. Almost like they were searching for something. He pressed his face closer to the window. The flashlight moved across the ground, across the wall, then toward his power box. And finally, the person holding the light stepped into view. Karen. But she didn't look normal. Her hair was messy and wild, like she had run through the forest. Her clothes were dirty, covered in leaves and dust. She moved in a strange, jerky way, like she was terrified someone was behind her but still forced herself forward. Her eyes were wide and glassy, reflecting fear. She crouched beside his power box and whispered to herself, though he couldn't hear what she was saying. He unlocked the door and stepped outside carefully. Karen, he called out softly. Karen spun around so fast she dropped her flashlight. She stumbled backward, breathing like she had been running for hours. Why are you out here? He asked. It's midnight. Don't come closer, she whispered. Please. He's watching. Who's watching? She looked around the forest in panic. I told you to go home. I told you not to get involved. He stepped closer anyway. Karen, your cable is still stealing my power. I need to. She grabbed his arm suddenly, gripping it with surprising force. Stop talking loud, she hissed. He can hear everything. He swallowed. The man inside your cabin? Her face twisted with fear. He's not inside now. He left an hour ago. Into the woods. His heart jumped. Why? Karen shook her head fast. He doesn't explain anything. He just comes and goes. I don't ask anymore. I just give him what he needs. And what does he need? Power. A tear fell down her cheek. He says something in the woods needs it. Something he's working on. He stared at her. Karen, what exactly is he working on? But Karen didn't answer. She looked over his shoulder suddenly, eyes widening. Her lips trembled. He's here, she whispered. He spun around. A branch cracked in the forest behind the cabin. A loud, snapping sound. Like someone stepping directly on a dry log. Then, silence. Karen grabbed her flashlight and backed away fast. I have to go. I have to be inside before he comes near your cabin. Karen. I'm sorry, she said with a shaking voice. I didn't want any of this. and she ran fast into the woods, heading toward her cabin, almost tripping over roots and rocks as she disappeared into the darkness. He stood there in the sudden silence, heart pounding, staring into the trees where the noise had come from. Nothing moved. But the darkness felt full of unseen eyes. He stepped backward slowly, hand reaching for the door handle. Just when he touched it, another sound came from the woods. A low hum. Soft at first. Then stronger. His stomach tightened. He had never heard anything like it. It wasn't a generator. It wasn't an animal. It was something electronic, buzzing from deeper inside the forest. The hum grew louder and louder, vibrating through the air. The trees shook lightly. Birds suddenly flew out of the branches, squawking in panic. And then, the power box on his cabin sparked. A bright blue spark shot out, making him jump back. The hum stopped instantly. Silence swallowed everything. He stared at the power box. Smoke rose from it slowly. Whatever Karen's man was doing in the woods, it had caused that. He went back inside and locked every door and window. He sat on the floor beside the lantern, breathing hard. Minutes passed. Then he heard it. A voice. Soft. Deep. Just outside his window. I know you're awake. His blood ran cold. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He didn't even blink. The voice whispered again. Stay inside. Until morning. Footsteps moved away slowly, fading into the forest. He finally let out a shaking breath. He crawled to the window and peeked outside carefully. But no one was there. Only the orange extension cable on the ground, leading into the darkness. The morning sunlight came, but it didn't feel warm. It felt cold, weak, almost shy. He woke up with a stiff neck, still sitting near the lantern. He barely slept after hearing that deep voice outside. His mind kept replaying the words. Stay inside. Until morning. He stood up slowly, stretched, and walked to the window. The forest looked calm again. Too calm. The orange cable still lay across the ground like a long warning sign. He followed it with his eyes until it disappeared behind the trees. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. His heart was still uneasy, but he had a plan now. If he couldn't get the truth from Karen, and he couldn't trust the strange man in the woods, he needed proof. Real proof. Video proof. He went to his truck, opened the back compartment, and pulled out a small black bag. Inside it was his old trail camera, the kind hunters used to record wildlife. It had night vision, motion sensor, and silent recording. Perfect for catching whatever was happening outside his cabin. He grabbed 2 more small devices, tiny wireless cameras he once used for security. They weren't fancy, but they worked. He tested each one inside the cabin, watching the small screen flicker to life. Good. Everything worked. He stepped outside and kneeled by the power box. The burn marks from last night's spark were still fresh. The smoke smell still hung in the air. He installed one tiny camera there, high enough to catch anyone who touched the wires or cable. Then he hid another camera behind a small tree trunk opposite his porch, pointing directly at the area where Karen had stood last night. Finally, he walked toward the forest edge. The trees were thick and the air cool. He picked the biggest pine tree near the path, strapped the trail camera to the trunk, and pointed it toward Karen's cabin. But just in case, he whispered. He set the camera to record every movement, no matter how small. He took a long breath and stepped back. Now all he had to do was wait. Hours passed. He stayed inside his cabin, pretending to mind his own business. He kept himself busy sorting food, cleaning the dusty shelves, sharpening a small pocket knife, and heating canned soup on a portable stove. But his eyes kept drifting to the windows. His mind kept replaying that humming sound from last night. And his thoughts circled back to the same questions. What was in Karen's shed? What was the man building in the woods? Why did he need so much power? Finally, the sun started to dip. Orange light painted the forest. Birds returned to their nests. The wind picked up slightly, whispering through the trees. He stepped outside to retrieve the first camera, the one by the power box. It had only been a few hours, but he needed early clues. He popped out the memory card and connected it to his small tablet. The first few clips showed only squirrels. A bird landing on his porch. Wind moving branches. Then a figure. His breath caught. The video showed Karen creeping toward his power box in broad daylight. Her movements were fast and nervous. She kept looking over her shoulder, as if she expected someone to jump out of the trees. She reached toward the wires, touched them, and whispered something. But it wasn't the whispering that scared him. It was what happened next. Karen looked straight at the camera. Directly into it. As if she knew it was there. But she didn't panic. She didn't get angry. She didn't even touch the camera. She smiled. A slow, uneasy smile. Like she already expected him to watch her. He paused the video and stared at her frozen face. Her eyes looked wrong. Bigger. Almost empty, like she was no longer fully in control. He replayed the clip again to check if he was seeing things. No, the smile was real. He set the tablet aside and retrieved the second camera. This one was near the porch aimed at the area where Karen had stood at midnight. He plugged the memory card into the tablet. The first few clips were normal, him stepping outside, checking the surroundings. Then something unusual. A shadow. Not Karen. Not him. Not an animal. A tall human figure, standing among the trees, watching the cabin. The figure didn't move. Didn't shift. Didn't step closer. Just stood there like a statue. The camera caught him perfectly, but the face was blurred by the darkness. He was there, he whispered. Just watching. Suddenly, the figure stepped back and vanished into the darkness without making a sound. No leaves moving. No branches cracking. As if he melted into the night. His heart thumped painfully in his chest. Now only one camera was left, the trail camera facing Karen's cabin. He felt nervous. He felt curious. He felt scared. But he needed to know. He inserted the memory card and opened the footage. The first hour showed nothing but trees moving in the wind. Then Karen appeared. She walked out of her cabin, dragging the long orange cable, her body shaking. She didn't look toward his cabin. Instead, she looked behind her own cabin, toward the shed. In the footage, she opened the shed door. A faint blue light spilled out, bright and unnatural. Inside the shed, someone moved. The strange man. He wore a dark jacket. Broad shoulders. His head down as he worked on something large, a machine with wires, tubes, and blinking lights. Then something else appeared in the video. A metal pole stood inside the shed, glowing faintly. A strange symbol was carved into it, something he didn't recognize. Karen stepped backward, terrified. The man snapped at her. Don't let him interfere. Karen nodded fast. I'm trying. I warned him. He's not listening. The man slammed a tool on the table. Then make him listen. Karen looked toward the forest, toward his cabin, and whispered. Yes. I will. Then she shut the shed door. The video ended. He sat frozen. Karen wasn't stealing power for herself. She wasn't acting strange for no reason. She was helping the man. Helping him build something. Something glowing. Something humming. Something he didn't understand. Something dangerous. And after last night, Karen had a new job. Make him listen. He felt a shiver run down his spine. Whatever was happening, he was now their target. He replayed the trail camera footage again, slower this time, watching every movement inside Karen's shed. The glowing pole, the strange machine, the wires running from his cabin, and the man standing in the shadows. The man's voice echoed through his head. Don't let him interfere. This wasn't just a neighbor stealing power anymore. This was a secret operation. A dangerous one. And Karen wasn't acting, she was obeying. He leaned back in his chair, trying to calm his breathing. His hands were shaking. Every answer he uncovered only created more questions. Who was this man? Why was he hiding? What was that machine? And why did he need so much power? He closed his eyes, replaying the man's voice one more time in his mind. It sounded familiar. Too familiar. Not from a movie. Not from a friend. No, from authority. A tone that expected obedience. A tone used by people who didn't ask for cooperation, they demanded it. He stood up quickly. He knew that voice. He heard it before on the mountain months ago when a sheriff deputy came around doing safety checks. A tall man with a deep voice, cold eyes, and a badge that gleamed in the sun. A deputy. A law officer. Someone whose job was to protect people, not hide in a shed stealing electricity for some strange machine. He whispered to himself, it's him. It has to be. He felt the world tilt for a moment. If the man in the shed was actually a law officer, then reporting him would be dangerous. Very dangerous. Officers could twist situations, hide evidence, lie in reports, and make innocent people look guilty. That explained Karen's fear. That explained her shaking hands. That explained her desperate whisper. He's not supposed to be here. Because if the deputy was doing something illegal, he'd need someone to help him hide it. And Karen, lonely, isolated, scared Karen, had become the perfect person to control. He paced across the cabin floor, mind racing. He needed more proof. Real proof. Something beyond shadows and guesses. He grabbed the cameras again, checked their batteries, and then turned off every light inside his cabin. If the deputy was watching, he didn't want to be seen. Night fell slowly, pulling darkness across the mountain like a thick blanket. The forest turned silent again, too silent. No crickets. No wind. No animals. Just the kind of quiet that made your skin crawl. He sat near the window, watching the trees. He needed to see if the man returned to Karen's cabin, or worse, came toward his. Hours passed. Midnight came. And then he heard it. A crunch. A soft, careful step on dry leaves. He held his breath. Another crunch. Someone was outside again. He moved slowly toward the window and pushed one corner of the curtain up just enough to peek through. A figure walked between the trees. Tall. Slow. Careful. The flashlight in his hand was dimmed to the lowest setting, barely visible. The man moved like he knew exactly where every branch was on the ground. Like he had walked that path many times. It was him. The man from the shed. The officer. His long coat swayed with each step. His heavy boots made almost no sound. His face stayed in shadow, but the strong jawline and broad shoulders were unmistakable. He wasn't heading to Karen's cabin. He was heading toward his cabin. His chest tightened. He stepped back from the window quickly and pressed himself against the wall. The man's footsteps grew closer. Crunch. 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 Then stopped. Right outside the cabin door. He stopped breathing. Silence. Complete silence. Then. Knock. 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 Slow. Heavy. Controlled. The kind of knock that said, I know you're inside. And I'm not leaving. He didn't move. He didn't answer. The man spoke in a calm, deep voice. I know you have questions. He swallowed. I know you've been watching. His heart hammered. There was another knock. This time harder. You need to stop. For your own safety. The voice was steady, almost gentle, but the threat underneath was sharp. You're interfering with important work." He stayed silent. The man let out a slow breath. "Open the door." More silence. Then the man whispered something that froze his blood. "Karen told me you're stubborn. That you don't listen. But you will." The footsteps moved away slowly. Crunch. 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 He waited until the sound faded completely before he crawled back to the window. The man was walking toward Karen's cabin now. But something was different. His posture was stiff. His movements fast. Like he was angry. When he reached Karen's porch, he didn't knock. He kicked the door open. The wood cracked loudly. Karen screamed from inside, a short, terrified cry. Then silence. Complete silence. He felt every hair on his arms stand straight. Whatever the deputy was doing, Karen was trapped. And she knew it. He kept watching. The deputy dragged Karen outside by her wrist. She tried to pull away, shaking her head violently. But he shoved her toward the shed. She yelled something too far for him to hear, and then the shed door opened. A flash of bright blue light spilled out. The deputy pushed her inside. The door slammed. The lock clicked. The light flickered. And the forest went silent again. He stepped away from the window, breath shaking, mind spinning. The man wasn't just stealing power. He wasn't just building something. He was controlling Karen. Threatening her. Using her cabin and her fear. And now, the man knew he was watching. He whispered to himself. "This is bigger than I thought, and much more dangerous." The mountain was no longer safe. He had to make a decision, and fast. Run. Or fight. But either choice would change everything. The mountain felt different when the sun rose the next morning. Not peaceful. Not calm. It felt like a place that was hiding too many secrets. He barely slept after what he saw the night before, Karen being dragged into the shed, the flash of blue light, the deputy locking the door, and then total silence. Every time he closed his eyes, the scene replayed again and again. He knew one thing for certain now. This wasn't just power theft. This wasn't just a neighbor problem. This was something dangerous. And Karen was trapped right in the middle of it. He stood at the window as sunlight spread across the trees. Karen's cabin looked quiet. Too quiet. The shed door was still closed. The padlock still hanging. The extension cable still running from his power box into the forest like a long, orange snake. He whispered to himself, "I can't leave her there." But he also knew he couldn't fight a deputy alone. The man was trained, armed, and clearly desperate. One wrong move and this mountain could turn into a crime scene. He needed help, real help. He grabbed his phone and opened the county website. There was a number for reporting misconduct by officers. But he hesitated. What if the deputy had people inside the department protecting him? What if the report got lost? What if they warned him? Then he remembered. He had proof. Real proof. Video footage. Audio recordings. Karen's terrified voice. The machine. The man's threats. He transferred all the files to a backup drive and then uploaded them to cloud storage just in case something happened to his phone. His hands shook, but he pressed call. A woman answered, calm and professional. County Office of Internal Conduct. How may I help you? He took a deep breath. I need to report one of your deputies. It's serious. Very serious. The woman's tone sharpened. Name? I don't know his name, he said. Tall, strong build, dark coat. He's staying at a cabin near mine. He's doing something illegal and dangerous. What kind of activity? He hesitated. He's stealing power from my cabin. Using Karen, my neighbor, to help him. But it's more than that. There's a machine in her shed. Something that glows. Something big. The woman paused. Do you have proof? Yes. Videos. Her voice lowered. Upload them through the secure link I'll send you. Do not approach the officer again. For your safety. He agreed quickly. He hung up and felt his knees weaken as he sat down. For the first time in days, he felt a little hope. The link arrived. He uploaded everything. Every clip. Every angle. Every sound. When the files finished sending, he exhaled deeply. It was out of his hands now. Or so he thought. An hour later, he heard a car engine climbing the mountain road. Strong, fast, official. He looked out the window. A white SUV approached, not the deputy's car. This one had county markings. His heart pounded. They came fast. 2 officers stepped out, 1 woman, 1 man, both wearing black jackets with bold yellow letters. Internal Affairs. They didn't knock softly. 3 sharp hits rattled the cabin door. He opened it slowly. You filed a complaint? The woman asked. Yes. We need to see everything, she said. Now. He showed them the setup, the cameras, the footage, the trail cam. They watched every second with serious faces. When Karen appeared in the video, shaking, scared, being dragged, the male officer whispered, "This is worse than we thought." The woman officer nodded. He's been missing for 2 weeks. He froze. What do you mean? He's no longer working for the department, she said. He fled during an investigation. We had no idea he was hiding on this mountain. His stomach dropped. So the deputy wasn't only corrupt. He was a fugitive. And Karen, he asked. Is she okay? We're going to find out, she said. The officers moved carefully through the trees toward Karen's cabin. He followed a few steps behind, keeping quiet. The mountain wind picked up, whistling through the branches. When they reached Karen's porch, the woman officer raised her hand and whispered. Stay back. She checked the lock, broken from last night's kick. They entered slowly. The living room was a mess. Drawers open. Papers everywhere. Karen's jacket lying on the floor. No Karen. Only silence. The male officer pointed toward the shed. He's been using the shed as his base. They stepped outside. The shed door sat closed, the padlock still locked. The woman officer motioned him back again. Behind us. Stay low. She whispered to her partner, on 3. 1, 2, 3. He kicked the lock. It snapped open. They pushed the door wide. A burst of cold air rushed out, colder than the outside air. Inside, the shed was dark except for a soft blue glow coming from the strange machine. It hummed quietly. But Karen wasn't there. No one was. The woman officer scanned the space quickly. He's gone. Took her with him. He felt his chest tighten. Why? Why would he take her? The male officer crouched beside the machine. Because she knows what he was doing. She's a witness. What was he doing? He asked. The woman officer exhaled slowly. We don't know. But it wasn't legal. The machine buzzed louder, a strange tremble running through the metal. Step back, she said. He moved outside quickly, heart pounding. The officers backed away too. The machine flickered, hummed, and then died completely. The lights went dark. The cable outside went limp. Karen's power theft, the entire operation, was over. But Karen was missing. And the fugitive deputy was somewhere in the mountains with her. The officers turned to him. You did the right thing, the woman said. You saved lives today. We're sending a full search team now. He nodded weakly. And the deputy, he asked. We'll find him, she said. He won't get far. They escorted him to his cabin and advised him to stay inside until more units arrived. But as the officers left, he stood at his window, staring at the forest. The mountain was quiet again. But not peaceful. Somewhere among the trees, Karen was still out there. And the man who terrorized her was running, wounded, angry, and desperate. The nightmare was not over. Not yet. He whispered into the still air. Karen, wherever you are, I hope you're alive. And for the first time since coming to the cabin, he locked every door. Every window. Every light. Because danger was no longer hidden in the shed. It was moving freely in the forest. And the story was far from finished.